Robinson. But before we get into either of those guys, because we're going to let people trickle in, have you had time to fully digest the win on Sunday, the first game of the Cam Newton era? Any lingering takeaways from that game?
Well, Sierra, I don't want to go on an entire rant about the coaches' film right now because of the situation that we're in. I understand there are bigger issues at hand than the media getting their hands on the All-22, but the All-22 still hasn't been released. So obviously I'm angry about that. Usually it comes out on Monday night, so we still haven't gotten the chance to really examine what happened in the passing game, particularly because of the way the broadcast angle is obviously shot. But at the same time, I think the biggest takeaway that I had was obviously all the things with Cam are awesome. All of it is great. We can talk a lot about it, all the different schemes, the sustainability of the whole thing, all that type of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, the way the defense performed, particularly in the front seven, and the way that they were able to put new pieces in place to fill out the guys that opted out or were traded in the offseason or left in the offseason, that's really, to me, I think what stood out the most was that they were able to put Adrian Phillips and Terrence Brooks and Jawan Bentley and have Copeland and Freddie Jennings play sparingly but important in key situations and piece this thing together in the front seven. I think that was a big concern coming in, and it's going to be really fascinating to see how they scheme up for Russell Wilson, how exactly they plan on containing him in the pocket. My guess is that a guy like Phillips or maybe even Kyle Duggar is going to be the spy on Wilson, and that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch as well. So I think that was my biggest takeaway at the end of the day, was that the defense looked pretty much the same as the defense looked last year, despite all of the new pieces.
Before we get into OBJ and Robinson, we got a bunch of questions here about J.J. Taylor. What do you think his ceiling is? Belichick, great things to say about the UDFA this morning.
Yeah, he played really well in a limited amount of time, obviously, that we saw him play. I think the one thing that you always want to look for with the running back is how quickly he gets up the field. And that initial burst that J.J. Taylor showed through the line and then the finish through contact that he showed as well was, I think, something that maybe we didn't get to see in full force in camp just because there is no live tackling and we're not going to the ground and no one's trying to blow anybody up. So you don't get those opportunities to see how is he going to do avoiding and running through contact. And that was one thing that really stood out about him in that game on Sunday. So the ability to get through the line quickly, the quick burst, obviously his size, he kind of knows how to play to his advantage and kind of do that cat and mouse game. There was one run, I think it was his second run, might have been his longest run of the game, where he sort of hid behind Jakob Johnson. And I don't think the linebackers really fully knew where he was. So that's one of those situations. We saw Dion Lewis do that a lot too. He's a little bit bigger than J.J. Taylor, but at 5'5", that you can actually use that to your advantage. Guys like Darren Sproles or Dion or now JJ can all have done that in the past. So I think that's kind of what you look at with JJ Taylor. We didn't get to see him catch the ball a whole lot, but we know he can do that too. So it was a really exciting debut.
One guy that we also didn't get to see catch the ball is Devin Asiasi. Dalton Keene was inactive on game day. At what point do you think that those guys, especially Asiasi, are going to start getting involved in the passing game?
Well, we talked about sort of the slow lead up that they were going to have, right? That even guys like Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez were kind of eased into it. Now, Gronk, I think his first week in the NFL, his first game in the NFL in 2010, he played 35 snaps, if my memory is correct. So definitely a lot more than Asiasi played. But even still, for a Hall of Fame tight end, they still only really had him playing 35-40% of the snaps. So that's going to be the situation. I think the one thing, we're all looking forward to these rookies. I really do get that. But you have to remember there was no preseason. So these rookies, this was the first time that these rookies have seen the NFL field. No preseason games, no nothing for them to prepare for this. So to count on one of those guys, I think Michael Onwenu playing 22 snaps on Sunday was incredible. And how well he played on top of that is honestly crazy. So the fact that they were even able to get that out of one of those guys was extremely impressive. But stay patient with the rookies, because right now this is truly their first taste of live NFL action.
Well, let's get to the burning question everyone wants to know over on Twitter and in the chat. Apparently, Cleveland wants to deal OBJ, and we're hearing Allen Robinson has taken all mention of the Chicago Bears out of his social media. What's going on with OBJ and Allen Robinson, and should the Patriots go out and get one of them?
Okay, well, the Odell Beckham rumor started by Mike Francesa. Whenever radio guys start rumors like that, I always kind of take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that Mike Francesa wasn't told that by somebody. I'm sure he was, but I think the whole thing with OBJ is it a Browns Baker thing, or has OBJ sort of lost a step? Because he has looked, I would say, from the beginning of last year into this year into Sunday's action, from what I have seen, like not quite the dynamic OBJ that we are used to seeing early on in his Giants career. So I'm sure that it's somewhere in there. Maybe he even has, kind of like a Randy Moss 07 season left in him where he has 1 or 2 years where he can really kill it. But I think that he has, to me, at least on the tape, maybe lost a little bit of what he had early on in the career. And my guess is it has a lot to do. He's had quite a few kind of lower body injuries, foot, hamstring, those types of things. I think those things start to add up. Do we get asked about Allen Robinson yet, or should I go into that spiel?
We do. We can go into that spiel.
Okay, so Allen Robinson is a different animal to me because this guy is really a perfect Patriot wide receiver. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's got size, which is something that they've looked for over the last couple of years, and he's a really smart, kind of instinctual football player, and he has gone out there with Mitchell Trubisky and Blake Bortles and all these scrubs at quarterback and continues to put up huge production. So to me, OBJ, everybody sort of knows, is the top 5-10 receiver when he's right. I think Allen Robinson is underrated to the point where he deserves to be in that top 10 conversation, but really doesn't get that sort of love, I would say, from people on the outside. So he's a really great player. I would trade a first-round pick right now if they could net Allen Robinson in that deal. And he's not really making that much money either. He's on a really team-friendly contract. So is OBJ to a degree, but Allen Robinson, the Patriots are only going to have to pay him about $9-10 million depending on when they trade for him in the season. So I think that's a really doable move. Now, obviously, if you trade for him at the deadline, you're probably not going to give up a first-round pick for 8 games. We're probably more talking about in the second-round pick range. But you look at Mohamed Sanu, got a second-round pick last trading deadline. Allen Robinson is obviously a much superior player. So if we're talking about moving for OBJ, moving for Allen Robinson, we're going to be talking about giving up some serious draft capital.
I like it. Well, I'm sure we're going to cover OBJ and Allen Robinson even more in depth on our website later on today, so we'll be on the lookout for that. Back to Sunday's game against the Dolphins, we have a lot of questions about individual players and their performances. First off, Chase Winovich. A lot of good things said about him by Bill Belichick after the game, saying expect him to play pretty much on all downs this season. And we saw him a little bit at nose tackle. Is that something that was unexpected or that he's had any experience doing? And how did you evaluate his overall performance?
I thought it was great. And obviously the plays against the run really stand out because everybody says he's not known for that. Let's be clear. In college at Michigan, he played on all 4 downs. He was a 3-down player on defense and a player in the kicking game for them. So it's not necessarily the trait that everybody points to with Winovich. Certainly his pass rush capability, his athleticism, hustle. Those are more the things that get sort of the credit, but he was a really good at Michigan as well. He was the only player in that draft class at the edge position that had a PFF grade of over 80 as a pass rusher and a run defender. So this is not a guy that's really as kind of green as a run defender as I think people think. So the plays that he made against the run really didn't surprise me a ton because I think he has shown that he's capable of doing that in the past. And the one thing that Belichick said after the game, I think it was his press conference after the game, or maybe it was Monday morning, he said that, they had Kyle Van Noy, they had Jamie Collins, they had Dante Hightower. There's a lot of veteran players ahead of Winovich on the depth chart, so it wasn't necessarily that he couldn't play more or that he wasn't capable of playing more. Just at the time, they just had other guys ahead of him on the depth chart, like I said. So he's really blossoming. The nose tackle thing was awesome. I thought that was really cool. We've seen the Patriots do that in the past. Mike Vrabel, I know, has done it in the past, and some of their other kind of twitchy or edge guys that can kind of just knife in just like Winovich did and really fire off the ball have also done that. I also think it was a little bit of a matchup thing where I don't think the Patriots were too high on the interior of the Dolphins offensive line. So why put one of your big Lawrence Guy type of guys right there in the middle when you can get that penetration from Winovich?
Couple questions here about J.C. Jackson. The Patriots put out a video this morning. Bill Belichick giving him the game ball last week. What do you think about his overall performance against the Dolphins? Well,
certainly coming to his, I think one thing about in my advanced stats report is that Belichick has sort of gotten a little bit more comfortable with letting J.C. Jackson play off the line of scrimmage. The Patriots are typically a very heavy press man team, right? They're constantly putting their cornerbacks in particular right up in the face of the wide receiver at the line of scrimmage. They want to jam him. They want to disrupt him at the line. And with J.C. in that game against Miami, they actually let him play off more than they let him play on the line of scrimmage and press. So what does that do for a cornerback? Well, what it allows them to do is allows them to not only guard their man, but also read the quarterback's eyes, right? So in terms of that interception at the end of the game, that interception doesn't happen if JC is playing press because his back is to the quarterback, so he can't read and react to the throw. So playing an off allows corners, and it's a riskier, kind of endeavor because sometimes it kind of attracts corners to jump routes and to jump receivers and try to go kind of hunt for interceptions, which can obviously put them in bad position at times if they're wrong, but it also allows them to be right some of the time, which is what we saw with JC on that play. So I think that allowing him to play off, allowing him to use his instincts and use his kind of feel for the game and coverage has really opened him up to a lot of those interceptions.
Let's talk Nikhil Harry. 5 receptions for about 40 yards, but of course, everyone's just going to talk about that fumble at the goal line for a touchback. Were you happy with how Nikhil Harry looked overall on Sunday?
Outside of the fumble, I was pretty pleased because I thought that he, for the first time, looked confident out there. It looked like he kind of felt like he was going up against guys that he could beat, which I don't think we really saw that from him last year. I think his confidence was waning at points, and it was sort of, in this that kind of rookie hazing limbo type of thing where like he didn't really look like himself out there. He's an alpha. He's a guy that's in college was super comfortable, knew that he was the best player on the field, that sort of mentality. And we didn't really see that from him as a rookie. So I thought in Sunday, he was definitely a little bit better in that regard, where it kind of felt like he was doing that. So I like to see that. The one route that he did have that I really like to see was that comeback curl type of option route where he read the coverage properly. He made a really nice break at the top of the route and was able to box out at the top of the route a little bit as well. That was the first time I think that we've seen him make that good of a break at the top of a route. So that was nice to see. Listen, we will have to see him get targeted more down the field. That wasn't really part of the game plan. I think this weekend in Seattle, their corners are a little bit more vulnerable down the field, and I'm looking forward to seeing if they can get him involved on the back shoulders, on the fades, on things like that, and let Cam give him a chance.
Well, we got Danny Boys feeling good about the Patriots after a Week 1 win. He said, although it's only been 1 week, when it's all said and done, do you think the Patriots are legitimate contenders?
I think it's tough to kind of say that they're legitimate contenders because Cam still needs to stay healthy for the entire season for them to be legitimate contenders. So that's always the caveat with the Patriots. I get that, and it can kind of get annoying, but to me, it's really is the sort of last frontier for them, right? If they can keep Cam, and I would say to a lesser degree, but also equally Julian Edelman, both healthy and on the field and performing at 100%, then I do think that this team can contend. And I think that really what it comes down to is they have a formula that we saw on Sunday that can win football games. They're not going to run the ball 42 times and only throw it 19 times every single game. But if they can do that, right, and they can run the football and be a dynamic rushing attack like what we saw against Miami, we're not talking about 3.5 yards in a cloud of dust. We're talking about over 5 yards a carry, being really efficient on the ground. And then they can combine that with sort of, kind of situational passing, right, where they get plays in the passing game when they need them and play good defense and special teams and all that kind of stuff. That's a formula that can work in this league. So I think that they can win games like that. I think that they can contend like that. But again, the question really is going to come down to health, and that's what it always comes down to.
Let's talk quickly. We have some people fighting with Nikhil Harry. We still don't know if he's the real or fake Nikhil Harry. I think he's the fake one, but who really knows? In the comments about whether or not he's a bust. But in the meantime, let's cover the kicking situation because Nick Folk was promoted from the practice squad just a day before the game. He did miss a field goal in that game, back demoted to the practice squad. What's their best option right now? Is he still their best option at kicker?
It's a good question. I think that with both these kickers, the team keeps on saying we got 2 good kickers, both NFL caliber kickers. Well, I haven't really seen an NFL caliber kicker yet out of either of these guys. Now, last year, Nick Folk was NFL caliber kicker. He was pretty solid for them down the stretch in 2019. Personally, I would still roll with Folk, and I think the biggest reason why is because he's still pretty solid on extra points. He hasn't missed an extra point, knock on wood, for the Patriots yet since they signed him last year. I know that's the bare minimum for a kicker in today's NFL, but those extra points are not gimmies anymore. So the fact that he's solid on extra points, the fact that inside of 40 yards, I think he's pretty solid on all field goals, that will take. And if he's going to mix a 46-yarder to the open end of the stadium before halftime, it's not the best thing in the world by any means, but you can kind of live with some of those.
And we're still fighting with Nikhil Harry over in the comments.
Stop labeling Nikhil Harry a bust after 9 games. Let's give the guy a chance. Come on, guys.
No, a huge overreaction. And you definitely see that Cam Newton is taking Nikhil Harry under his wing. Even in press conferences, last year Nikhil Harry was just, it seemed like he was really dreading talking to the media. And this year, way more pleasant, I would say, way more optimistic about his future this season under Cam Newton. So got to give him more than one game. I mean, if he didn't make that fumble, if that was a touchdown, we all would have been singing his praises after that game. So we can move on from that and see how he does against Seattle, which will be a tough outcome. We have a couple questions here about the new practice squad quarterback out of Central Connecticut State, one of my dear state schools. I'm a Connecticut girl. Who is this guy and what do you like about him? He's 6'7", so
that's the starting point. But Jake Dolegala, I believe is how you say it. I'm terrible at pronouncing last names, so don't butcher me for that one. But he's an interesting player because in high school, he tore his labrum in his throwing shoulder his senior year of high school, and he had a bunch of FBS offers at that point. After he tore the labrum in the shoulder, all those FBS offers obviously went away, and he actually spent a year at prep school, and then he finally makes his way to the FCS, and that's at the point in time where he sort of shined, but also I think with his raw talent, people were expecting just a little bit more out of him. So he's one of those guys that when he throws the ball, it's pretty. It's similar to Stidham, honestly. When he throws it, it's really nice. It comes out of his hand nice. There's no hitches in his release. There's nothing disjointed about it. He has an absolute cannon of an arm. He might have had the biggest arm in that entire draft class a couple of years ago. So he's got a hose. He's got the size, obviously. He's got some athleticism. He ran around a little bit at the FCS level. I'm not really sure if they're going to do that, in the NFL, if he's really that much of a scrambler. But if you want to go back and watch his tape from the Cincinnati tape from the preseason last year, there were some moments where you said, okay, this guy can throw a touch. He can throw with accuracy down the field. And there were some things there. So I think ultimately in Cincinnati, they end up drafting Joe Burrow. And do they really need 2 young quarterbacks on the roster there? Probably not. So they ended up moving on from him. But I think he does have talent and is definitely worthy of a practice squad spot, certainly.
Have a couple questions about the young rookie linebackers. Josh Uche, a very surprising inactive player on Sunday. Anthony Jennings got the go-ahead. What did you think about about Jennings? And is Uche expected to play against Seattle and going forward?
It's a good question. We asked Mayo about it this morning, and he said, listen, guys, I'd love to answer the question of my pay grade. You're going to have to talk to Bill. Or he actually mentioned Nick Caserio is sort of involved in those game day roster actives, inactive types of things as well. So that's a GM coach question, not necessarily a position coach question. But I think with Uche, ultimately, I think what it came down to was that the packages that they knew that they were going to be in, it probably wasn't going to be a lot of snaps for him anyways. Anthony Jennings, as it is, played, I think, 9 snaps or something like that. So that's all they could get him on the field for. Copeland didn't play a ton either. So they were just really counting on using those safeties like Phillips and Brooks and Jawan Williams in the box as basically linebackers. And that was kind of what the game plan was going in. So really keeping a guy like Uche active over maybe, what turned out to be a very offensive line heavy day, for instance, was probably not in their best interest. And sometimes you have to realize that it's not necessarily about talent or about ability, but just the game plan going in, what exactly they're going to do defensively, offensively, plays a big role in who these guys are active or inactive.
More questions here about some late additions, late viewers about Allen Robinson and Odell Beckham Jr. If we just want to quickly summarize your thoughts on that, and then they can head over to CLNS Media and Patriots Press Pass later today for our full breakdown.
Yeah, so I think with OBJ, the question is how much do you feel he can really tap back into the old OBJ versus what we've seen in Cleveland over the last, 17 games or whatever it's been. I'm a big OBJ guy. I've written about the Patriots trading for OBJ in the past. We obviously know about his relationship with Cam Newton. That I think could be a factor here. He obviously did the offseason thing with Cam Newton, the roundtable discussion that they had right after Cam signed in New England. OBJ was a big part of that. So that's... there's a relationship there. They worked out in the off season, all that kind of stuff. So I think that Cam would obviously be the first one, clamoring for this one. But again, I really feel like at this point in time, I'm more confident in Allen Robinson's ability, and I would love to see him in New England. I think that Robinson, Harry, Edelman as your top three would be really formidable. Not that it wouldn't be with OBJ too, but I just kind of wonder what's going on with OBJ? Is it a Cleveland thing? Is it a Baker thing? Or is it something going on with him personally?
So much Nikhil Harry arguments here, and whether or not the Patriots should have gone with DK, if that's something they obviously regret now. But just again, at what point do you say, okay, they might have made a mistake? And how long is the grace period for Nikhil Harry to really come into his own?
I would give him to the end of this season, honestly, and I know that a lot of people don't have that kind of patience, and I get that, but I would really wait until the end of this season to have a full kind of opinion on it, because I think in that first game, I know everybody doesn't want to hear the excuses, but Cam Newton only completed 15 balls and 5 of them went to Nikhil Harry. So a third of his completions in that game did go to Nikhil Harry and the number 1 first round pick and all that kind of stuff. So no, it wasn't explosive. No, it wasn't down the field. It wasn't any of those things, but he was involved, and there was a couple of plays, a little screen RPO that they ran. He certainly left yards on the field. I thought that some of the bashing of him for leaving so many yards on the field on that play went a little bit too far, if you ask me, but he definitely got tackled by a guy he shouldn't got tackled by just on first contact. But it looked to me like he kind of was unexpectedly kind of got caught in the middle of a cut and sort of running him over, and wasn't exactly sure, should I try to juke him or should I run him over? And he got kind of caught in the middle and sort of got himself tackled almost. So there was instances in that game certainly where he made mistakes. The fumble, that was certainly there. But again, the explosiveness, the route running, the ability to create some separation in the targets that he did have, the scheme touches and the ability to kind of create like that. That 2nd and 5 play doesn't get looked at a whole lot either. Cam actually checked out of that play and kind of hit Harry by surprise, and it was a bad throw. It was up and high and behind him, and Nikhil kind of turned and made the catch, and then it was able to run over some guys for a first down. So those little plays right there suggest to me that he's making baby steps. That's what I wrote on Sunday. They're baby steps. We all want to see these huge splash DK Metcalf is doing, AJ Brown is doing, Terry McLaurin certainly in his rookie year. We all want to see that, but let's just kind of, wait a little bit here.
Well, for all the rest of our Patriots content, we'll have all the OBJ, Allen Robinson breakdown you could have. We also have a video on Nikhil Harry in his performance after the Dolphins game. So you can find all of that on clnsmedia.com. And of course, on our YouTube channel that you should subscribe to at Patriots Press Pass. We'll be back for another live Q&A very soon.